Okay, Alison, my dear friend, my soul sister, my colleague. So happy to have you coming onto the podcast to share your story, to share your journey. And for the listeners, I would just love for them to get a little bit of a sense of who you are, your background, and what led you to the place that you're at right now.
Okay, thank you, Cindy, for having me. I went to naturopathic school with Cindy, and so we both graduated together, and that was a beautiful, difficult, challenging road to get board certified. And then soon after, I started taking a gap year. I went to Thailand right after boards, actually. I went to Thailand and spent about 9 months traveling, partially finding myself and working and doing the fun things that I didn't really get to experience beforehand. And along the journey, my partner joined me, and we kind of have not stopped traveling since. We come back home, which is in Toronto for the summers, but we've been away every winter for I think the last 15 years or something like that. It's been a lot of years. And so we've done that as a couple, but also with our kids as well. So as a family. And basically, I gave up my license, my practice license, while we were continuing on this journey. And I'm a full-time mom and love every bit of it. And yeah, find myself on this journey now with two kids and truly grateful and blessed to have found myself at this place.
Hmm. Yeah, just witnessing your travels and your adventures and the way that you and your partner navigate life and really create a life that you are excited to experience and are exposed to so many different things and expose your kids to so many amazing things. And it's just beautiful to watch. And you're also so generous of like your souls are so generous, you and your partner. It's and you guys, you know, the listeners know a little bit about some of the things that I've been through as well, but how supportive you guys were able to be for me. And through the winter even like offered your house for us to stay in here and there, like just such a special couple, such a special family. And I feel very blessed to be in your life at all. So yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I feel John and I both feel tremendously blessed. He fell into a career that he loves and makes enough financial stability for us to share our love and blessings with other people. And I think for a long time, I actually felt a bit guilty for not working, for not struggling through the rat race with everyone else. But now I realize that it's my choice to be happy, and I don't need to make exceptions or excuses or rationalize how I want to live my life. And the best way that I can be grateful and blessed for my life is to share it with others. So I'm happy that you're a part of my circle and I can trust you and love you and shower you with all my blessings too.
So sweet and such an amazing perspective on life. And whatever cards you get dealt, it really is a beautiful thing to share that with other people and feel that closeness and that bond with the people in your life. It's yeah, the way that you have navigated things is just like, I don't know, just being a witness to it is so beautiful. Um, and I want to get into a little bit of a tricky circumstance, a difficult circumstance that you found yourself in. And I'm wondering if that really amplified the perspective that you have on life, if it amplified how you approach things and how you navigate things. And yeah, so if you can give the listeners a little bit, you know what I'm alluding to, but if you can give them a little bit of an idea of kind of what brought you to this kind of yeah, it's one of those big moments in life where you have to take inventory of everything really.
Yeah, it's one of those blessings in disguise where in the moment you don't see it, but looking back, you can kind of pinpoint that it is that turning point of awareness. And I've always been kind of in search of that self-awareness and mindfulness and all that, but sometimes you need a little slap in the face to say, wake up and really
Mhm.
take account of your life and be responsible for your own happiness. So a little background, John and I, my husband and I got married in 2016. And basically a month after our wedding, we got pregnant with our first son, Calvin, which happened easy peasy, no problem. So I assumed like getting pregnant in the future was no big deal. And for anybody who's had fertility issues, that's like so heartbreaking to hear sometimes when people are like, oh, it was so easy. And, and they say it because you're a first-time mom and you want to share it with the world. Everything is circulating around your children, so you're always talking about it. And even without really being asked for your advice or your comments, it kind of pops out because it's such an exciting time of your life. And I actually had a very difficult time with my first son. I felt I was one of these, I can take on the world, I can do everything. I'm not working, so mom is my job, and I'm going to do everything wholesome and to the best of my abilities. And I had a really hard time asking for help. And so I struggled a lot with sleep and anxiety and just not feeling myself, because you kind of lose yourself when you have a child at that and you become fully immersed with them and only them. You kind of lose, especially while you're traveling, because you don't have your community and your friends group to kind of lean upon. And so I really had to battle and work to find myself again and to create that balance in my life. And, the whole process, I still loved being a mom, but it was a different challenge that I wasn't expecting. And we wanted to have 2 children. And so we had kind of been open to trying, but we weren't necessarily like doing all the steps to try. We were just being open to it, not using protection. And if it came, it came. And when it was, after Calvin turned 2 and we didn't get pregnant, I was like, what's going on? Like, maybe I'm just stressed out, and I was still breastfeeding. So it wasn't such a big deal. I was just ending breastfeeding actually. So I just started getting my cycle again. So we thought, like another year is no big deal to see what happens. And then Calvin turned 3 and I had my cycle and it was regular, but I wasn't getting pregnant. I think we had 1 miscarriage within that time period. It was, yeah. So when he was around just after 2, I got pregnant and miscarried. I think it was 9 weeks. The baby was 9 weeks old-ish. And sorry, not the baby, but the embryo or the fetus was 9 weeks. I was 9 weeks pregnant. And that was hard, definitely to deal with. And the process of miscarriages is very personal. It's happening to a couple, my husband as well, but it's very physical. It's very physical emotionally, hormonally. Physically, your uterus is contracting and causing you a lot of pain. You're bleeding a lot. And you're trying to balance being a mother and a wife and for whoever has other people that depend on them. And it can feel quite lonely, to be honest. And I've thought about this a lot because I've actually had 8 miscarriages. And some of them would have been miscarriages that I didn't even know about because it came maybe a day late of my period cycle. But because I was aware and testing myself, I knew that I actually had a positive test and then miscarried. So some of them were, a lot of people would never have even known they were pregnant if they were in my situation. But it's still the same process that you have to go through personally. And you can chat with it with friends and partners, but it's a very internal, personal journey of release, of acceptance, of, is there something wrong with me? Am I not doing enough? Am I not being enough? Do I have to relax more? It's constantly putting yourself on a checklist of like, what am I doing right and wrong? And how can I do it better?
Mm-hmm.
And I find that as parents or parents who want to become, people who want to become parents, we put tons of onus on what can we do for others, specifically our kids. Like if eating that junky whatever bar and soda is not good for you, you can take responsibility for your own health. But when it comes to like being pregnant or feeding your child the same things, you're all of a sudden more alert and hyper aware of the responsibility it is for others. And so when you have multiple miscarriages, it's every time you're thinking, oh, was it because I exercised too hard, or I didn't sleep enough, or I don't have a passion and I should be like working and focused on something else? Am I not blessed enough for what I have? You know, like there's just all these things that come through your mind. And uh, I did go through IVF, the protocol. So when you go through the lab testing to make sure physically everything is okay, your hormones and everything is balanced, and your, you know, fallopian tubes are okay, and the sperm is okay, and all that stuff. And everything was fairly okay. I had one blocked fallopian tube, but nothing like major. And yeah, so the process of that internalizing what's wrong with me is a big one that I've had to work through a lot.
Mm.
And so jump back to now, I've done all the IVF follow-ups, and we're going to do the implantation part, or the retrieval of the egg. And so I'm actually about to go in on my next cycle. Like I've had my period, and the next cycle I'm going to go in and retrieve eggs, and I actually get pregnant. And then I miscarry. And then before the next cycle, we're going to try the retrieval again. But before we get to that point, I find out that I have an illness that needs to be taken care of. And just to set the scene, I had just visited, the day I found out about this condition, I was visiting my girlfriend whose mother just passed away very suddenly. And I was there with her, trying to console her, being compassionate to her. And I was driving home from that trip, just, you know, still kind of in this mental state of not taking life for granted, and being present with family, with loved ones. And my doctor calls me, and I'm driving on the highway by myself, not with my child. And she tells me I have thyroid cancer.
Oof.
And so obviously I had found a nodule and had done some testing beforehand, but like thyroid nodules are very common. They're often benign. I had zero symptoms, zero anything to make me think that it was anything serious. Besides, I felt it in myself that there was an irregularity, and I just wanted to get it checked out. So yeah, I had gotten an ultrasound, and then they said, let's just do a fine needle aspiration to get a sample of it. And this was the call that said the results came through and it shows cancerous cells. And
Wow.
so I'm like driving home, just like blubbering, like I could barely see. I was like, put it on auto drive. Like, this is kind of just like dangerous. I get home and I'm just like, I get home to my boy and I'm just like hugging him and being with him as much as I can, and just sobbing, and he's unsure what's happening. I guess Calvin was around almost 4. And my husband comes home. I didn't want to text my husband or anything like that. I wanted to tell him in person. And my husband gets home and sees that Calvin's like playing by himself, not with me. And he's like, oh, where's mommy? And she's like, oh, she's upstairs crying or something
Oh.
along those lines. So he thinks like we just got into a tussle or something. And I'm like needing to like decompress from that. And I'm like sitting in the bedroom folding laundry. I could hear him come in. As soon as I heard him come in, I just lost it, because he's my rock. He's the person that I can lean on and be soft with and vulnerable with. And while my son was there, I was trying to hold it together. You know, I was crying, but I wasn't like a total mess. And as soon as I heard him come through the door, I just crumbled. And he's always, always, always been there for me. And thank goodness he is that rock for me, because anytime we've hit difficulties, it seems like our relationship gets stronger. And I'm so blessed that that is what happens, because, you know, stressors can amplify what's already there. And if there's not a solid backbone, it can just make your foundation wobble and crumble. So it was super, super comforting to know that I could lean on him while his business was also crumbling. He was like rebuilding his business from scratch. It was such a chaotic time of our lives. And it was funny because just like not long before that, John and I were talking about wanting to travel somewhere new and be uncomfortable. We were like asking the universe for something uncomfortable to push us and be stronger and broaden ourselves and expand ourselves. And we're like, oh, oops, maybe we shouldn't have asked for such a big step.
Yep.
And
It
and
delivered.
yeah, it delivered. And so I remember that night, I just wanted to be as close to John as possible. The day I found out, I just wanted to be as close as possible. And I want to say that night because it was such a special moment, but it would have happened within like 3 days of finding out my diagnosis. But we conceived. We conceived basically the day I found out I had cancer. And I had to like make a decision because for those who don't know, thyroid cancer is not generally malignant or it doesn't metastasize often. It's not fatal. It's more of the mild cancers, if you can say that. But at the time, like I didn't know. I wasn't like putting my medical hat on. I was just like, I have cancer. I have the big C, and like I'm going to die soon. Like what? So I remember that night I journaled for hours. I like videotaped myself saying a message to my family saying how proud I am of them, how I wish they lived their lives, and like how I wanted one more day, one more moment, like just everything. And that was definitely a turning point of like seeing the world in a slightly different way. Like the leaves of the green seemed brighter, the sun seemed to shine stronger, like just that kind of awareness. And it doesn't stay with me like 24/7, but it's definitely a reminder that it's not just I want one more better day. I just wanted one more day. I wanted more of the hard. I wanted more of the heartbreak. I wanted more of the fights and the love and the everything. I wanted more of everything. Like life was everything. So I find that often when I'm feeling overwhelmed, specifically with the kids or with life in general, it's not about not feeling that hard, but recognizing that that's part of the beauty. Like that's part of life. And I wanted more of that too, even though it sucks at times, even though you feel like you just want to escape and run away and like not deal with it. It is part of what made me want to live, right? And want to fight and be there for my family. And so, ironically, you were one of the people that I thought about with like, if I had to have someone take care of my kids, who would it be? And I was like, I think Cindy would be a great mom for my kids. And maybe her and John would ever find love at some point. I was like thinking, who can take care of my husband because he loves to be taken care of. So if I'm not here, who will that person be? And and you were the first person that popped in my mind.
Oh my gosh.
And
I'm
so
just so in tears listening to how you took in that information and where your mind went and how it so quickly went to just like cherishing and savoring every moment that you have, no matter what that moment looks like with your family, and and thinking about how they'll be taken care of and leaving them a message, like such an outpouring of your love right away to the people in your life. So beautiful.
I actually highly recommend videotaping yourself when you're in a vulnerable state.
Mm.
Because when I look back at that video, it's not a message to my family, it's a message to me. It's all
Mm.
the things that I want if I were to parent myself, if I were to like look at my little girl self, to be like, I want you to aspire to love your life and be proud of yourself no matter what you do. You know what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's a very powerful thing to do because you see yourself in a raw way and you see yourself, yeah, not put together, not trying to like fit a mold or fit expectations or
Mm-hmm.
be somebody for somebody else. So
Yeah.
that's a really cool thing to do if you find yourself at like wit's end and you want to make sense of yourself. Yeah, to videotape yourself a message.
Mm-hmm. Then you can watch it when you're feeling a little bit more stable, and what a
Yeah,
powerful message you can get from yourself to yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's the irony of having cancer and then getting pregnant and basically having one thing you want to grow in your body and the other thing you don't want to grow in your body happening at the same time was kind of like mind-boggling because I really had to trust myself. Like being pregnant and having a disease or something, you're not necessarily in control of how it's going to develop or proceed. You can change your diet, you can change your lifestyle, you can decrease stress, all that stuff, but like it's still happening in your body without mental control of it. And so I had to trust that my body was doing the best that it could for me for both situations, right? And
Hmm.
even before I knew I was pregnant, because obviously you don't know when you conceive that you're pregnant. I was already just like, okay, baby is out of the picture. I'm going to focus on myself. I was thinking about, do I need radiation, chemo? Like, do I need other things happening? What's going on? And baby was like the last thing on my list, which again, the irony, because that happens to a lot of people once they like,
Mm-hmm.
but I do want to say letting go of that attachment of wanting something is super mind tricky because
Mm-hmm.
you want a child, you want a child. Just saying that I don't want a child or I leave it up to the universe is you still want it. You may release your hold on expectations and I don't know, doing everything you can, spending thousands of dollars on something that you think should be natural. But I just, I feel like you want what you want, and to deny yourself of that want is not being true to yourself either.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm still working on that balance of how do you let go and still want and believe that you're worthy of what you want. And it may not be in the way that you expect. You may, adopt or have a surrogate or something, like it may not come in the way that you plan in your mind. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's still important to know what you want and the reasons behind it so that you can hold space for the universe to show itself and you can welcome it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Versus just being like, okay, I'm having trouble, so okay, two is enough. Like, I don't want any more kids because obviously the universe is saying I can't have any more, whatever, like, but that'd be
Mm.
denying your true self.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
And it's also about like when you're quote unquote letting go, it's still doing the things that will bring your desire towards you. So let's say it is going through fertility treatments or whatever. But I think letting go of your value, your worth being attached to that outcome,
Right.
I think maybe that's where the letting go comes in,
Right.
instead of what you're saying, which is denying the fact that you do want a child
Mm-hmm.
and that it could come in whatever way. Um,
Yeah, that association of worth to it or being enough or value,
mm-hmm,
huge. Because often we do things, work, even how we play with our kids, how we approach relationships can be from an expectation of if I show more love, then they'll love me back or whatever it is.
mm-hmm,
If I have a good paying job, I'll feel smart and valued enough or successful.
mm, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So knowing that no matter what happens in your life, that you're still worthy of the things that you desire, and you're worthy because you are,
Yeah.
because you exist, and
Yeah.
that's it. No strings attached to that.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
of the things that I've been working on is so your thyroid is often associated with your throat chakra. And growing up as a child, the youngest of three kids and the only girl, I felt like my voice wasn't heard. I had not very strict parents, but I had the expectation that I had to do as they say. And I think because I had two older brothers who didn't really follow that, I felt the pressure to be the good girl. And I've recently been doing some work on recognizing it's not about being heard and seen by like my parents, but by myself,
Mm,
right? So not denying how I feel, uh, whether I'm happy, sad, angry, disappointed, like recognizing that first. And then I can go into root cause, figure out how to like move forward from it. But I often bypass that initial feeling, like especially an upset feeling, and just say, okay, like, what can we do to get rid of it? Let's move forward, versus hearing what it has to say. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth, but in that moment, that's what my body feels as the truth. And so I need to hear it in order to let it release out of me, to let it go.
Mm, absolutely. So, like having those different parts of you actually being seen and heard by you. So, the throat chakra expressing itself and being, recognized by yourself. And like really that's what like becoming whole actually alludes to, which is this like, you know, seeing yourself, all of you, without those fragmentations that like and cutting off pieces of ourselves that we might see as or perceive as undesirable or unwanted, or those like dark emotions or those shadow parts of ourselves, but seeing ourselves fully as a whole and healing. That's where healing can occur, really.
And loving and accepting all of you.
Mm-hmm.
I've done several different counseling, coaching sessions and different ways of it. And one of them was really interesting, where you take this negative, whatever feeling that you have that you generally want to get rid of, and you say the opposite of it. So if I feel lonely and depressed, the opposite is light and vibrant, full of energy, whatever it is. And then you keep going back and forth between the dark and the light until it becomes one. And it's not one because it's meshing the two, but you can see that the dark is also your light, that the dark is part of you that is either nourishing you, protecting you, keeping you safe and warm, and healing you, whatever it is. And so for me, when I'm lonely and depressed, I feel like I'm in this dark cave, but it's actually like a cocoon. So I used to see it in a more negative way of like, get away from me. Like, I just want to be by myself and cry and be angry. But I've been able to reframe it as like, this is my safe place that keeps me contained, and I can be introspective and safe to then come back into reality and like be immersed in my community, right?
Mm-hmm. So it serves a purpose. It's there
Yeah.
still
I
for
don't have to
you.
get rid of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Integrate it, if anything, right? And see
Yeah.
it for what it is. That's so interesting. I want to mention briefly that I am going to experience. I've never done anything like this before, but I'm going to experience psychedelics for my birthday, which is coming up soon. And my therapist was like, "What's your intention? Like, what do you want to get out of it?" And I was like, "I think I just want to like see myself fully. Like, I want to explore my shadow parts and just see myself. Like, who am I? I just want to know myself a little bit more." And I want to see those parts and I want to explore them and I want to just be with them and have that awareness, but also offer like that curiosity and that love and that acceptance to those parts that I'm very likely not seeing. It's probably a blind spot for me, right? And and yeah, I think that approach of just no matter what challenges come our way, it's really about seeing like different parts of us come out and how we can integrate those parts and become like quote unquote whole again and heal and offer love and gratitude and acceptance to all of us. And then we can offer that to the people in our lives.
Yes. So that's often, as a parent and mother, especially, you give yourself before you heal yourself. And
Mhm. Mhm.
so you're giving away parts of you versus coming from a place of abundance.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That martyr versus like having a cup that's just like overflowing, right? Because
Yeah.
you've been so nourished and poured into your own cup so much. Yeah.
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 I definitely, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I hear the way that I was parented kind of start to shine through of, you should, I do all this for you. Why aren't you?
Mm.
Just do it as I say, all those really hurtful things that I guess I'm still wounded by and have not healed from, starts coming out. because I'm not being mindful, I'm not being present. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you navigate like like you had to go through some treatments and change your lifestyle in a way while parenting and while growing a human in your body? What was that experience like?
So I obviously got the okay with doctors first, and I made sure that I was taking care of myself, but we actually didn't change much of our lifestyle. So in terms of the thyroid cancer that I had, all it needed to be done is removal. So I didn't need to have treatments done. And so basically we were watching that the cancer wasn't growing. And basically, if it was growing, then second trimester was like the safest time to get the surgery done while pregnant.
Mm.
But if possible, which with thyroid cancer is a very likelihood because it grows slowly, if possible, wait till baby was born. And so we actually traveled to Mexico that year, that winter. I found somewhere that could do imaging. And so I was getting once a month imaging done of the thyroid as well as imaging of the baby growing. And we've actually traveled pregnant like the time before. So we had gone to clinics in Hawaii, in Japan, in Thailand, like we were making it work. And so John and I kind of take that approach. We take it one day at a time, one moment at a time. If something's not working and we're away, we'll book a flight and come back home. Like we're not so structured and set that we can't be flexible, but we also think, why wait? Why wait for the perfect time to do whatever? If we want to do something, we commit to it and then we make it work around that, right? If you are constantly saying, when I make 100,000, then I'll take that trip to whatever. And then at 90,000, you think, oh, I just want to buy a car, or like, I want to, like you might not ever get to that point, or your want to go on this trip changes and now you want to do something different. Like if you want to do something in that moment, take the leap and you can figure out how to make it happen. And you're a perfect example. When I said I'm going to celebrate my 40th in Mexico, who wants to come? You said, I have zero childcare. I have zero support. I don't really know if I have the money, will have the money at that time, but I'm going to commit because then that way I'm going to make the situation, the opportunity happen for me. I'll be searching for childcare. I'll be open to saying yes to opportunities that come my way. It's what happens and even if you commit to something and it doesn't work out, you can still be truthful and say, I gave it my all and I shot for the moon and landed in the stars, or whatever it is that people use that analogy. Like it's never a failure to reach. And I don't think it's ever a bad time to say yes. So even to this day, we still travel with the family and we say we take it 1 year at a time. Next year, we'll see if we can do this. And we're not so set on it, but we also are excited for what's coming up. And so, yeah, we traveled while I was pregnant and had this thyroid cancer that I was monitoring. And we came home and delivered my second son, Jaden. He was born April 1st. And then I think he was 2 months in June something. I had a hemithyroidectomy and I said yes to all the help I could get. I said yes to bringing in support. I learned from my first. So we had a night doula come 2 or 3 times a week to help support the night feedings as well as like prepping food. So I had nutritious food to eat all day long. I said yes to my in-law and my mother-in-law spending all day while I was recovering in bed and just taking all the support I could get and not being afraid of not feeling like I was enough, I was saying yes because I deserved it and I was worthy of it versus I can't do it alone. But I also believe that one person can't do everything at a high level all the time. I think you can have it all, but it might be spaced out. Like I still want a very passionate career at some point, but I don't want to have it right now. I want to be fully present as a mom and be as balanced as possible so that I can spend time with my family and not feel stressed and overwhelmed. And so I think you can have it all, just not necessarily at the same moment. And some people look like they have it all, but I guarantee you that in some aspect of their life, they're struggling, or they're not necessarily happy with how they are showing up for life in that way. And that's a choice. It's not a good or bad or right or wrong. It's a choice. And so for me, I've kind of grown up thinking that I was going to be like badass boss mom, like doing everything at the same time. And this cancer definitely, and the infertility definitely kind of woke me up to say, you can do it, but you don't have to. And I
Mm.
think like women empowerment, the minute that women could do it all, they were expected to do it all instead of you have the choice. And if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, you were empowered to have that choice. You're not just a mom. You are a mom supporting the next generation of life and growth and abundance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the most important jobs ever for the future.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Alison, if you're okay sharing, I'd love to hear a little bit about your like labor and birth experiences. Um, they're obviously going to be vastly different because of the place in life that you were at with both of your sons. But I'd love to hear what that experience was like for you, especially with traveling and then navigating your health a little bit differently the second time.
Right. So both boys, I traveled and did midwifery appointments, OB appointments on the way, like I mentioned. And with Calvin, I was very set on home birth and having my midwife there and my doula there and my husband there, and like it happening in a very natural, beautiful way, as everybody kind of hopes to. And I had a bit of a rude awakening when my water broke first and I didn't birth within 24 hours of that, right? So you have like a time period where if your water breaks first, that you can conceive at home, but then after a certain period of time, they want to move you to the hospital just in case of infection and other things. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was
To birth at home.
progressing. Yeah, so I was progressing pretty well at home. And this was actually at my mom's house. We chose to birth at my mom's place. And things were moving along relatively well. And then I got to about 6 centimeters and just kind of stalled out. And I didn't feel like I was stalling or anything like that. Like sometimes labor, that's what happens. You don't necessarily progress with dilation, but you progress in other ways that are not visual and measurable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but at the time, they gave me up to 30 hours, and then they said, if you don't show any progression, let's transfer you to the hospital. And some of the big differences with my births were, I mean, with most women, not all women, but most women, the first birth is a little bit slower. Your body's hasn't been primed to birth yet. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
the second one, like things happen quicker and smoother, and it seems you also are a little bit more mentally in the know of what's happening and where you are in the process. But my husband he couldn't be around me for the first, he was in the room beside, but he just couldn't like see me. And we always use the word, like a lot of people use the word pain, but it wasn't the pain. It was the contractions. It was going through the motions, and I was moaning and making noises. And he perceived it as painful and hard. And so he just couldn't even be there to like hold my hands. At one point I was like, you sit down and you hold my hands. Like I force him. And he was so uncomfortable. So thankfully I had my doula there. And then when I hit that 30-hour mark and I wasn't progressing, oh my gosh, I was exhausted, first of all. And I just got so deflated. Like when you talk about how the mind can really control how you feel, how you respond, like this was in a way that was so negative, and I had no will to keep pushing. And I was like reaching for help to say, what should I do? And the doula, bless her, was, listen to your body, what it needs to do. You listen to their body, and all I wanted to do was sleep. And so I like took a rest, but it just like I could feel everything shut down. Like I could feel that the progression of everything just stalled. I wasn't mentally like breathing and focused. And so then we eventually moved over to the hospital. I wasn't sure how, because I didn't picture myself in the hospital. I thought if I went to the hospital, it was going to be because it was an emergency, not because it was like by choice.
Mm.
And, you don't necessarily put yourself in that mindset of like all the different outcomes and what it will actually feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was still contracting on the way to the hospital. And when they bring you to the hospital, generally they put monitors on you because they want to make sure baby's okay. And when they stick these monitors on you, it's not very comfortable. And so it was pushing. And when I was going through contractions, it was really painful. And they said, lie this side, no, switch over. And like they were telling me what to do during contractions. And I was like, okay, give me the epidural because I'm just exhausted in terms of fatigue, but also I just can't like bear this like moving me around and like all the pain. So I got an
Mm-hmm.
epidural and it was still another 10 hours and I got induced too. It was still another 10 hours in the hospital before baby came out. And I was really thankful that I had my midwife because they stay on. Like generally they'll take breaks and swap out, but like they will stay with you until baby is born. They don't have a clock in, clock out the same way as OBs and gynaes do. Like maybe some midwives won't stay the whole way because they have a secondary generally. But my midwife stayed with me and it just made me feel more comfortable because she knew what my plan was. She knew like what I was hoping for. And so she could rally for me, but also give me that medical support and safety if I needed to change courses.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
again, John and I are very flexible type people. Like we're not so rigid where we're not going to like see any other option. So I think going into a birth with that flexibility really is a saving grace because then you can have grace and trust for yourself and your team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to vaginally birth Calvin after 40 hours, right? From when my water broke.
Yeah.
And he was healthy and fine. He was a little bit small, a little bit jaundicey, but like that was my experience in the hospital the first time around, like being stuck in bed with monitors on me with an epidural, like basically just lying there saying, why isn't the baby coming? What's happening?
Mm-hmm.
And then second time around, I come I come back and I am put into a hospital because I have thyroid cancer at the same time, even though they're not necessarily correlated. They want to make sure I'm in Sunnybrook, which is where I was also getting my thyroid cancer support. And
Okay.
so I planned a hospital birth for this one, but I want to wait as long as possible to get to the hospital because I don't want to be strapped down, monitored, and I don't want to have that whole sequence of events happen if it doesn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that birth was interesting because Jaden was very little. My husband and I are both 5'3", 5'4", like we're little people. And Calvin was a small baby. I think he was 6'4" when born, but Jaden was even smaller. And so they were worried that maybe my placenta wasn't big enough to nourish him till full term. So they were actually planning on inducing me 2 weeks before my birth due date.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to my naturopath at the time, and she was like, well, if you want to do this birth on your own terms, like here are some things that you can do to move it along. And I did those things. And like that night, I was like, all right, baby's coming. Like I could feel all the movements and everything happening. And
If you don't mind me interrupting, what were some of those things?
so there was like positional things that you can do, the hip swing, the balls, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, what I did was I drank castor oil.
Okay. And it works for sometimes. Yeah.
And obviously you want to have like fresh new castor oil. You don't want to make sure it's not rancid.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's generally topical. So what it is an amesis that makes you want to vomit, right? And so it makes things move. And so I chugged as much as I could handle. And then within minutes later, I threw up and things just started rocking and rolling. Like I could feel everything like moving and moving and happening. So I was doing hypnobirthing at the time. And so I was focused on that and
Mm.
just like breathing because I could feel it was contractions, but it felt deeper. It felt like slower, longer. And so I was doing that while I was sleeping. And apparently John got up at like 1 in the morning to go to the toilet and he could hear me like moaning and breathing. And I was sleeping. I was like semi-conscious, but I was like listening to my hypnobirthing and like breathing in a very intense way. And him getting up kind of stirred me from that that zone. And I was like, I think I'm in like pre-labor, like I'm pretty sure. And this is again 2 weeks early. And so we had to make a decision because we don't actually live that close to Sunnybrook. We live like a 45-minute drive away. And if come rush hour, it can be like an hour and a half, like
Mm,
Toronto traffic can be gnarly. And so
mm,
we decided that we would call my brother and have him come to our house so that he could be with Calvin while Calvin was sleeping in the night. And we would go to my parents' house, which was closer to Sunnybrook, and like finish pre-labor there before going to
okay.
the hospital. And I also had a doula at the time, so I was like in communication with her. And so my it's funny, as I was leaving our house and my brother was getting here, I heard like a snap in my belly. And I'd never felt that before, but it felt like a rubber band going, and
Mm.
nothing happened. It wasn't like I was gushing water or anything like that. So I was like, that's weird. Okay, so we are like driving to my mom's place. Again, I'm like super focused, breathing, open. I, surrender, wrote all these affirmations to like be in the space. I felt much more calm and confident. And I was like obsessed with my ball. The ball. So I
Yeah.
was just like, that ball has to come everywhere with me. So John's like carrying it with the birthing bag and everything. And we get to my mom's place. And again, I'm like, I just go straight to the bed on all fours, swing, and John, like, bless him, has stepped up his game and is just like hip squeezing me and like being there for me. My mom is rubbing my back. It was just like awesome and beautiful. And then I was like, can you time the contractions? Because it seemed very long, like lengthy contractions. And then John was timing it, and he was like, well, this is kind of like saying we should go to the hospital, like the 555 or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Remember anymore. And and I was like, but like I don't want to go too soon, right? Like I don't want to get there and then be like, lie down, strap all these things on me and all this
Yeah.
stuff. Talking to the doula. And the one of the keys is if like you can't talk to them, that's like a sign that it's time to go. So I was like having John talk to her, and she's like,
Mhm.
I should go. So we go to the hospital, my husband and I, him carrying the ball in the bag. And we park at 4:02 a.m. in the Sunnybrook parking lot. It's obviously dead quiet. I'm waddling over every 20 steps. I have to stop for a contraction. He's waddling, him carrying all the stuff. And we get into the hospital and we have to go up the elevator. And as I'm walking through the main entrance. There's like securities and all that, but like I didn't even think to get a wheelchair, but I was just waddling through. I had to sit down on the waiting chairs every so often, and my water breaks. And I'm wearing, a pad, but like I'm like, oh, it just gushed out. So I'm like still waddling, going up the elevator, down the hallway. The woman's saying, what's your name? And I'm like, telling her all the things like through ragged breath, giving her my health card and stuff. And I was like, I feel like I need to push. And like, I felt that as soon as my water like leaked. And I think that snap must have been my water breaking, but it was a slow leak. And then
Oh, yeah.
as I sat down, it like gushed more
Yeah.
because that makes sense to me. And so yeah, we're at the desk, and I'm just telling the lady, like, I feel like I need to push. And she's like, how many babies, like, have you been pregnant before? Have you had a baby before? I was like, yes, this is my second. And she's like, all right, everyone. Like, she just, like, everyone starts like getting into action. They like, my husband's still filling out whatever forms, and I go to the table for them to just examine like where I am. They pull my pants down and they're like, oh, she's ready to go. So I don't even change my clothes into anything, and they wheel me. And this is also at the end of COVID. So we're like masks on, like and I didn't know this, but my husband went to use the bathroom because he had to pee really badly. And I was wheeled into the delivery room. Like it wasn't even the proper room because that was like I didn't have enough time, and they were like crawl onto this table and like we're gonna pull your pants down. I was like all these things happened, and by 4:30 baby Jaden was out of me. My doula just like came into the room in time to like take a couple pictures. John's face was like side by side to mine. I wanted to labor on my hands and knees, but the delivery person wasn't comfortable with that. So they were like, okay, sideline. So I was on my side, and John's face was like right beside my face. And I was like squeezing his hand. And it was just like such a magical moment. And I don't know if you've ever experienced a moment where you're like, oh shit, here we go. Like they're just like push, like the head is coming, let's go. And you're just like, oh shit. And I remember that as a similar feeling to surfing. I
Mm.
remember going out farther than I've ever gone before and like not being that good of a surfer. And one of the instructors was like, okay, take this one and just pushed me. And I was like, oh no, I can't like back up from this. Like I'm going for it because I have no other control. And so I pop up too early and I'm like looking over the wave and I'm just like, if I bail, that'll be way worse. Like that'll hurt way more and be more scary than like just going for it. So that moment of just like, fuck, here I go. And I'm like, just like dig into it. I think, because you like snowboard. So that
Yeah.
just going for it. That was
Yeah.
like the same feeling as birth. It was just like, oh shit, here we go. Like, I guess I'm not getting epidural. This is just happening. And yeah, it
Yeah.
was like awesome and beautiful and so empowering. And yeah, it was such a, not that the first wasn't a positive experience, but I wasn't really a participant. I didn't like, I pushed Calvin out, but I was numb with the epidural. I didn't have that intensity. And not to say it's any better or worse, it's a different type of labor, but this one was very intense. It was
Mm-hmm.
very intense, and obviously everything happened safely and healthy, but yeah, it happened quickly.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, so quick. Like you parked at 4:02 and he was out by 4:30, eh?
Yeah. And
And
then
like
John just like threw the ball out the door. He was so mad with the ball that he was carrying around.
you didn't even need it.
No,
Oh, I thought
I
I
didn't
lugged
need
it
the
out.
ball. He was just lugging it around.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
But with Jaden, with your second, from the time that you took the castor oil and you started feeling things like start to move and you felt like, okay, this is labor until he was born at 4:30 a.m. How much time was that?
I think I took the castor oil probably around 10 at night.
Okay. And right away you felt like things were moving?
Yeah, because like I threw up and then it was
Oh,
just like
right.
lots of heat, lots of
Mm.
blood flow in that area. And
Mhm.
just to be fair, I also had a sweep done twice, 1 week prior and then like I think the day before.
Okay.
They wanted
Yeah.
they wanted me to naturally go into labor, so they were just
Yeah.
trying to like speed up the process.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was it was quick.
Yeah. And the did you end up having a look at the placenta to see like what shape it was in and how healthy it was and because
Yeah,
usually
yeah,
no?
it was
Okay.
yeah, there was everything was normal with it because I
Mm.
remember being like, because I remember sometimes the healthcare system wants your safety so much that it almost feels fearful, like, oh,
Mm.
your body's not able to do this on its own, like you need our interventions and stuff. And I remember being very aware that I didn't want to be put into that fear situation. And so I
Mm.
was just very confident that my body knew what it was doing. And probably because of the cancer and all that, I had to have faith in my body, right? Like I needed to trust that it was looking out for me with this and also with baby. And
Mhm.
yeah, just having that confidence in yourself to be able to trust and be open and vulnerable and take things as they come. I don't know, just that whole process was very empowering. Even though I didn't
Yeah.
necessarily choose to be in the hospital and I didn't necessarily like I was in the hospital every week getting ultrasounds and monitoring because they thought the baby was too small and not moving and not like active enough, right?
Mm.
And and
Mhm.
I and I really had to trust my healthcare team because I chose to be in that system. I could choose not to be in the system and not have like anybody support me, but I'm
Mhm.
choosing to have them as my team. And so I also need to trust that what they're doing is for my best interest. That doesn't mean I have to do everything they say if it doesn't align with me or, you know, there's options. But I needed to trust that what they were doing for was for my best intention. And if I'm choosing to listen to them, that I do so willingly in a positive way, not like
Mhm.
have to because they say so.
Yeah.
Because I know I've heard a lot of women who've had maybe not birth experiences that were of their choice and they see it in a negative light, specifically if they get a C-section or something like that. And I think it's important to know, like, everyone's on the same team, everyone's on the same side, you know? These practitioners have seen the worst of the worst, and so they're biased in some ways because they don't want to repeat that, but they're not against you. They're not trying to harm you. And so if you don't believe that your situation requires whatever intervention, that's your choice to make, to say no. But if you're choosing to listen to the healthcare team, it's also your responsibility to be as positive and supportive and hopeful for that, right? To trust them. And then
I
not
agree.
feel crappy afterwards, right? To just,
Yeah.
that was what was in the moment the best decision you could make.
Yeah. Yeah. Like act according to what feels most aligned with your values in the moment. It's not always possible, instead of ruminating afterwards and feeling that sense of regret or whatever might come with it. Um, I think that really speaks to the mindset going in. Because if you do have that mindset that's like very adversarial and like, oh, I wish I wasn't in this system or whatever, like it will feed into negative outcomes versus having that trust, which that was your initiation in this experience. It was like, how much can you really trust your body?
Yeah.
And that is so foundational to labor and birth. How much can you trust your body? How much can you surrender? And and my lord, you had to do it on such a deep level and go to the depths of it, right? And resulted in a beautiful birth experience where you trusted your healthcare team. John, or your partner, rose to the occasion, right? And really supported you and was there for you. And what a beautiful outcome after learning that, I need to just really trust and surrender and have faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a beautiful story, Alison. Um, I'm going to ask you one last question, but before I do that, do you have anything else that you feel you are feeling called to share, or anything else from your story that you feel will really resonate with listeners?
I guess if anybody's going through hardship, which everybody has something that they're dealing with, whether it's on a smaller scale or big scale, it's still affecting you. Don't be afraid to get support and find like professional support, right? Whether it's a naturopath or supplements and healthcare, or if it's somebody energetic or a life coach or something, and I do this all the time. I almost always have somebody that I'm working with out of curiosity of just like, what is it that they're doing and how does it work, or I want to experience it for myself, but also just to support, because we all have partners and friends and people that we can share with, but it's not always easy to have a one-sided conversation of trying to heal yourself instead of trying to heal the other person. So I would say if you're dealing with infertility, if you're dealing with cancer, if you're dealing with, a labor or a loss, or just regret, anxiety, postpartum, whatever, like try to find support for yourself. And it doesn't have to be the best. It doesn't have to be referral from somebody who's like well-known, whatever. Just find somebody who you can resonate with. And then if it doesn't, you can try somebody else, but it's not okay to do it on your own. We don't live in the same kind of communities where we are supported all the time. And so to be feeling lost and alone and feeling like you're doing it isolated, it's not okay. And you can heal yourself for sure, but it's so much more empowering to have a community or a person to support you. So I've done all different things. I've done ayahuasca, I've done, cupping, TCM, energy work, EFT I'm working on right now. Like, I just try lots of different things to see what resonates with me. And to be honest, I think I'll probably just bounce around to different things because it's just interesting. And I can delve into myself in different ways. So just don't be afraid to ask for help, because that was one of my biggest lessons, my takeaways is it's okay to want support and help. And that doesn't mean anything about your worth. And you are worth it to have help and support.
Yeah, you're worth having that support and that community around you. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And your answer might be the same for the question that I'm about to ask, but I love how many times we talk about community on this podcast because it's foundational. It's like it's a big part of who we are as humans and how we've evolved. And we're not meant to do this on our own, especially not parenthood and motherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the last question, I'll just set it up a little bit like I always do. One of the big missions for me doing this work is, yes, to support parents, to support families, to support mothers, to have an empowered experience, and to also have that experience imprint onto this new life that's coming into the world. And so when mothers, when parents, when families have these empowered experiences where they feel they're in an ecstatic state, a euphoric state, or just feeling like, wow, we did this, it imprints that love and safety and trust onto this new life that's entering this reality. And they're born into that. And I think that's like the parasympathetic response. That's oxytocin speaking to us, right? And I think that stays in our cellular memory for the rest of our life, right? Like we move through the world then with a sense of safety and love and trust. And that's how we interact with other people. And I think when enough mothers are supported in such a way, the next generation will very likely not interact with each other in an adversarial way, in with war and with oppression and suppression and all of these things. So I think it has the potential to really impact the world in a positive way going forward. So in the present moment and moving forward into the future. Yeah, so it's big, but I feel like every birth is like a microcosm of what's possible. Every birth is like a ceremony of liberation in a way, right? So with that being said, what would you like to imprint onto the ears of the listeners? So it's people preparing for birth, people in the postpartum period, people trying to conceive, and people who are just using their creative womb space energy to birth something beautiful into the world. What would you like to imprint on them?
I think as humans, we're always trying to do better than before, like better than our parents or better, like become better humans, better people. So I feel like the process of birthing that next generation to be more mindful and more loving and supportive of our world and each other, I hope will happen. And the thing is, everyone's trying to become better, but they have a different perspective. If you come from a war-torn home, better might not look the same as somebody who's come from an affluent, safe, and loving situation, right? So I think the biggest thing is to trust in humanity, to trust in each other, to trust yourself, to trust the process, to trust the universe. And if you commit to doing your best in whatever way that looks to you and being open-minded to the diversity of our beautiful world, that there are so many different perspectives, and for any factoid you can find 10 others that naysayers or that prove otherwise. Like, you have to trust that even if you are not in agreement with a process, a decision, what your body is doing on your behalf, that to trust that it has that good intention and that you're committed to, I guess, following through with what is true to yourself. And so for my example of like, every time I've had 8 miscarriages, every time that hope fire lights up when I see the 2 lines, I don't dampen it. Like, it's so easy to be like, again, 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 but I want to still trust my body is doing the right thing, whether it's not carrying the baby through or if it's allowing this life to grow to completion, if it's a disease that's growing in my body that, I'm doing all that I can to support my body to be strong enough to withstand it, but just trust that what's happening in my body, what's happening in your situation, what's happening in the world, you can only have so much control, and to be okay to release and trust that process. And that doesn't mean you do nothing. That doesn't mean you just say, okay, I'm not gonna like research anymore. I'm not gonna like look for solutions or take my supplements or eat healthy because it's gonna happen. Like, I don't believe like that. But if you put that good energy and intention out there, it will come to you. It just may not be in the way that you expect or that you anticipate or that you're attached to. I don't know. Yeah, the trust is a huge one for me right now. That's just top of mind. Trust and being open to whatever the universe wants to show you and to learn from it. Because I feel like if you don't learn from your challenges, they'll keep repeating itself. And so being open and aware that this is an opportunity to grow and learn something. That doesn't mean you can't feel sad and shitty and hard. You can feel it all and also know that like tomorrow is another day to start fresh and to be open to what the world wants to, what opportunities lie in your way.
Yeah. I love that so much. The theme of trust is so strong in your journey and in everyone's journey, and how deeply we can trust and surrender to that and let go of our own timelines, our own expectations, our own vision of how we perceive things should be, and knowing that it will come as it will, and it'll unfold as it will, and trusting that that is what's in the highest and best good for us. So thank you for that, Alison.
Of it, you're a beautiful being, and I thank you for sharing your love and your knowledge and wisdom with everybody, because you pour it from your soul, and every pore of your body is so positive and supportive and loving.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel that in my heart. So if anyone wants to follow you or see what you're up to, how can they follow you and reach out to you if they so desire?
So I don't really have my website going anymore, but I'm on Instagram, so you can find me there, and on Facebook. Instagram handle is Dr. Alison Chen.
Okay, awesome. I'll put that in the show notes for everyone. And I thank you so, so, so much. I'm so grateful for you taking the time to do this and for sharing your story so openly and so vulnerably, and giving us the lessons that you were able to pull from those experiences. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I love you.
I love you.